Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Whipple.
Good to see you again. As we talked about, we're going to do a Q&A of your journey here through this acquisition process. And I was looking back at our history together here. And in 2019, around June, I think you might have grabbed something off the website. Then you started group coaching. You went through a course. You did one-on-one coaching in October of 2019. We physically met in London in January of 2020. And then about February of 2020, you stopped one-on-one coaching. You made me an offer, which was a good offer, to have a piece of equity that I've said no to every other one, but didn't say no to that. And so we've been able to keep in touch and hopefully have some help to you along the way. So why don't you talk about how you began the process, why this was important to you, how you built your board, certainly problems and how you dealt with those along the way.
My background was always in sales. So I am a sales guy, so to say. I had my entrepreneurial beginnings parallel to my school education in the sales or in sales. And I thought that it would be good to have to maybe go a little bit further back. And then I migrated to another country and started there in a middle management position in a huge company. And then I felt relatively quickly that that's not something for me. I have to have the entrepreneurial style. I have to build something. So it was quite clear that I will start my own company again or be working for myself again. And so it was a quite unexpected thing that I found you through several channels, several recommendations, I have to say. Mm-hmm. And then the whole process makes totally sense for me, for a salesman, so to say, because I had the feeling that the whole process you talk about is nearly it's a sales thing. So if you look at it, it's a sales process. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, why shouldn't we make the stakes higher and sell your idea to financial institutions, to sellers, whatever, and make the steps a little bit bigger and don't sell products for a little bit of profit, but sell the idea and make a whole lot of money of it. So that's basically the start I had. And the whole thing to buy a company seems a lot more intelligent and a lot quicker than to buy a company from scratch. So that's basically your headline, so to say, in your podcast was the
you're buying revenue, right?
Yeah, and you're buying revenue.
Yeah, and your process was not unlike what I did. I found a mentor who I learned this from, and applied it, and he would tell you that exactly. He ended up using a process that goes all the way back to Andrew Carnegie. So so you did that. You started this before. It's hard to believe now, but you started before COVID. But talk about what you did with respect to building your board, how that process went, how you reached out to them, what you looked for, that kind of thing.
It's a pleasure to talk about the board building, but maybe I have to say some words about picking an industry and maybe have some advice there. Because I went through a lot of different industries and thought about them, had a lot of discussions about different industries, and I decided basically on two that would be, let me say, the best choices. So two different industries, but in a similar sector, let me say like that. Mm-hmm.
And for the purpose of this, we're only going to say that you're in Europe and it's in healthcare. That's all Correct. We're going to say. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so I decided on one relatively quickly. but in hindsight, I would say the second choice maybe would be even better.
Oh,
But
okay.
doesn't matter. I have plans for the next roll up too, so that doesn't matter. But what I want to say, and maybe some advice there, is
Sure.
investigate the hell out of your industry before you pick it. But don't wait too long. So take a short time, investigate the hell out of it, check real deep if there are players on the market that do the same thing, and then decide. And if you decide really wrong, so if it's a disaster, so to say, then fail fast and start from the beginning. And don't care if you already pick board members, industry experts, whatever. Most of the board members, I will talk about the building process, but most of the board members will fit in any roll-up if you choose good board members. Only the industry experts you have to change. So, but it doesn't matter if you have board members you have to fire if the idea is not worth pursuing. So I think
that's really good advice across this whole process. Somebody said to me the other day, the thing I need to do is I need to fail faster if it's going to fail. So whether that's picking the industry, picking the board members, whatever it is, if the dog doesn't hunt, then get off and get on to another one. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So 100% agree with that. And I picked my industry and built my board after that. So it was not really after that. During the process of picking the industry, I had some discussions with potential industry experts, etc. So it started with picking the industry, and I started with the industry experts. So I started to not with the chairperson or something like that. I started with the industry experts because they got me credibility and knowledge about the industry. I then could use to bring on other board members. So I think that was really relatively important. And the board, or the building the board, was really the easiest part of all. So that was really easy. Maybe not everybody wants to hear that, but it was it was really easy. So I had the whole board complete in about 4 weeks, something like that. And that was a good experience. The first meeting with the it was the first meeting in person with the potential chairman, and I was nervous for sure for this first meeting, but the second meeting was absolutely different. So there was one situation that was completely new for me. It was a little bit strange. It was I was nervous, but in the second meeting, I was a whole different person. So I got a lot safer in my body, so to say, or in this position. So I was annoyed after the first meeting with myself because I felt a little bit nervous, but everything made me stronger in this situation to just try to talk to people and sell your idea. There we are again with selling. And
you did that through LinkedIn primarily, or did you do anything else other than LinkedIn?
For me, to reach out to really heavy hitters, so to say, was best way with email. To find their email and contact them directly via email. I got the biggest hitter through this channel, but I also used LinkedIn for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And like I said, the board building was quite easy, but there were some hard times after I completed the board. So 2 board members left. So the first one was, I think, 2 months after the completion of the board, and it was not. He didn't left, so or he didn't leave. We just agreed upon, or we agreed that it didn't work. So he didn't he didn't brought to the table what we wished for, and so it was quite obvious that we cannot work together for a longer period of time, because he didn't worked as we wished. So
yeah, and I remember we had a discussion that your first chairman was a super aggressive type A personality, and he was basically saying, "This is do this and do this and do this," and we had a discussion where we talked about going back to him and saying, if it's life or death, okay, but you're going to have to let me,
Yeah.
make some
Yeah.
mistakes along the way. Ultimately, that chair didn't work out, but I think
Yeah.
that process helped a little bit anyway towards that.
Absolutely. So the guy I talked about was not the chairman. It was the first board member, but my chairman said it correctly, and it was even worse than that because he left a couple of days before their first board meeting.
Oh, that's right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that was a motherfucker to be
Yeah.
honest. That was quite a challenging time, and that was maybe the hardest time so far.
And you
To
still went
get.
through the board meeting, right?
Yeah, we did. We
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing was to explain why he left because I
Right.
think everybody looked up to him.
Yeah.
So there was some discussions, and that are not easy discussions. I have to say it like that. But I think these particular circumstances made me extremely strong and confident because after he left, I maybe it took a couple of days, and I have several really good candidates for a chairman position, and I still have. I have no problem if one of the board members resign tomorrow. I have someone new. It's
Usually
perfectly
you've gotten better, so you end up with someone even more talented than you had
so.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I should add this that both of the board members I added on later in the process were both better than the first ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much
Almost
better.
always
So
happens. Almost always
yeah.
happens.
So
Yeah.
and in hindsight, I'm really let me say thankful that this happened because the chairman I have now is we work perfectly together. So
Yeah.
that's a really good relationship we have, and yeah.
Okay. And then, so you did that pretty quickly. You had some bumps, as you talked about. Um, when things fell apart, you still pushed forward, which is important. Then you had to get accountants and lawyers, right?
Yes, that was. I was not 100% honest, Mr. Whipple. The professionals were even easier than the board
Yeah.
members. Really,
Yeah.
the professionals were a no-brainer in my case. So I just took recommendations from my board, asked them
Yeah.
if they have connections into Big Four and international law firms. I took the advice, I took the connections they had, and I went in. We had several discussions. Where I had one day. I scheduled 5 meetings with low to mid tier or
Yeah.
lower
Lower tier.
lower level
Yeah.
companies. One day, 5 meetings just to warm myself up a little bit into the process, and then we directly went to the international law firms and the Big Four, and with all the discussion with the Big Four and the international law firms, we get with all of them acceptable terms. But we choose with the let me say the best in the country I am
Yeah.
for Big Four, and with the law firm we decided on the one who gave us the best. Yeah, or we had the feeling we have the best engagement partners there.
Yeah,
So that
which is
was
important. A lot of people say, well, this one gives a better discount than the other. Well, that's great. But who can do the better job? Who has the other services that can help you, whether it's acquisitions, financing, or whatever? And one of the things you just mentioned, which may be lost on some people, but it shouldn't be, is you used your board connections. So,
Absolutely.
who do you know that we should contact? And if that means that they should reach out first, then that's fine. But however you do that. But yeah, a lot of people just don't use the boards, period. So from the beginning you did. So good for you.
Absolutely.
And it was
I think
easier, as you said.
Yeah, for sure. So, and maybe I should add that I brought them with me, the
Yeah.
board member who,
Yeah.
let me say, introduced us to the firms, and that helps. That gives credibility. They know each other, so I was relatively easy, I have to say that. And I changed one time I changed the law firm, but it was just because we got a better engagement or let me say a better interpersonal fit in working together. And I think that that's really important. And maybe I like to mention or to highlight that that the engagement partner is really critical. So if you have a good engagement partner, he will do nearly everything to get the deals done, and also protect you in the law firms or in the firms.
Yeah.
Because there will be times, maybe if you had some transactions failed, that the pressure in the law firm is higher as you can imagine. So, and they try to stop the engagement partner you have the engagement letter with to do more work without payment. And if he or she doesn't protect you, you will lose the law firm.
Yeah,
So, for sure.
Yeah.
And
there's sometimes some people you talk to who everything sounds good, but then you find out you're going to work with a 2-year associate or something like that. So to your point, one of those questions is, who am I going to be working with? Am I going to be working with you? And that obviously is something you did along the way. So that was easy peasy. Then you talk to some financial institutions, maybe not as easy.
So where should I start? In the first discussions, it all went relatively good. So they all accepted, let me say, or they all liked our strategy. They all said they understand our financing model, how we finance the deals. So portion of different, let me say, earn-out components or something like that, and the other part of senior debt from the bank.
Mm-hmm. So some seller equity, whether it's
exactly.
actual equity or seller financing coupled with some commercial debt, if you can't do 100%, right?
Exactly. So that was these discussions went well, and let me say 80% said, that's something they can do. But let me say the problem started later, where we tried to actually finance one target. And then let me say the argument started that they thought, and that was the argument of nearly all the banks who declined us, was they thought we had more equity in the company, not use equity to finance deals, but we have a bigger equity pool or let me say equity in the company itself, in the holding company. And that was the issue most of them had, that we don't have really a huge equity stock, let me say, or cash in the bank. So they are
like most
heavy
starting this process,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and maybe to mention, in this process, I think most of the people start with even less than we had in the company.
Yeah.
So we had a relatively big cash cash in the bank, but in the country where I am, that's not considered as extremely or it's not
but it's safe to say that you're not in a country like the United States where for $200 you can incorporate.
No, absolutely not.
So
and that was the issue. So they said, they thought we had more equity. Equity would be also in, let me say, in real estate or in shares we already own. So that's also equity, but they didn't thought we had
nothing.
The situation,
almost nothing.
Basically.
Yeah.
So that was a hard negotiation or hard negotiations with the different banks to get through to the right bank, and finally we got a bank where they accepted our terms, let me say, and but that took a while, and maybe that was the hardest part so far, to be honest. So it was maybe not the hardest in the sense technically hard, but emotionally and also from the time perspective, it
Yeah.
was relatively hard.
And did
Yeah.
you find that sometimes people in a bank would say, yeah, no problem, but then as the process went higher in the bank, then you encountered problems? So you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily talking to the right person?
I think most of the time we talked to the right persons, but yeah, we had this scenario that they checked with the whoever, and then
Yeah,
it didn't went further. So yeah, we
yeah,
had this situation.
yeah, yeah. So then you had your financial partners reasonably picked out, and then you went hunting for deals.
Yeah,
And this again
exactly.
was pre-COVID, right?
It
Yeah,
was pre-COVID.
yeah. I think if I remember right, you
So
had five LOIs or something like that that
yeah,
that that disappeared once COVID happened.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
So
maybe
so
to
walk us through that.
so the time frame where I started to reach out to potential sellers was about 3 months, something like that. So it was a relatively short period. And at the beginning, I was overwhelmed from the response rate and also let me say, the willingness from the potential sellers. Like you said, I had relatively short time. I had 5 LOIs done.
And you did,
And
which a lot of people will be crying when they hear this, but you only did letters. You really didn't even do cold
yeah,
calls, right?
so like I said, my background was in sales, so I am familiar with
Mm-hmm.
cold calling, so that was not an issue for me. I
Mm-hmm.
tried cold calling, absolutely, and I tried follow up to with letters, but it seemed that it didn't work out, or it didn't work
Mm-hmm.
out well. So I was not able to reach the sellers, etc. So it was not an efficient way. So
Yeah.
I decided to just use letters, and that worked perfectly well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it worked. I think it was the best method so far. I made some tweaks and some changes to it over the period with the letters. I tried some things out, and the one of the letters works better than the other one. But overall, the response rate was over 20%
Yeah,
sometimes. So
yeah, which is a
it was
great
good.
for letters. That's a
Yeah,
great response rate, and that's with no follow up. They were calling you or
yeah,
contacting you.
exactly.
Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah.
And yeah, like I said, through this method, I got 5 LOIs relatively quickly. And then COVID hit. So, and they were all scared as shit, let me say it
Mm-hmm.
like that. And all of them disappeared, the sellers,
Mm-hmm.
for different reasons. Some of the sellers saw that they were not able to get the price they thought they will get because the companies went down in respect to their cash flows, and other sellers were just let me say not confident enough to work this process through these hard times. So they were scared to death. They didn't want to meet. They didn't want to talk. I don't know what the problems with all of them were, but yeah, they all fell apart in these letters, and
Which
in
for
this.
most people, and maybe you, uh, is you talk about it emotionally challenging. That's pretty emotionally challenging. You put together
It
these. Now
was.
you did have COVID as a reason, but still you had five LOIs. Looked like everything was sailing fine, right?
Absolutely. So it was a hard time, absolutely, but I think I was not. In retrospect, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to tell, but I don't have the feeling it was too emotional detached to these LOIs or to these problems or challenges. So I think I got through that relatively good in terms of
I'd agree
my.
with that too. I don't remember you ever crying in your beer and saying, "Woe is me." I don't
No,
remember
no,
that. Yeah.
I don't think that was an issue. But I think what was more of an issue where I saw the dropping response rate, where I saw
Hmm.
that I couldn't acquire new candidates. My letters didn't work as they did
For a long time, right?
for a long time.
For
Basically,
basically
the
a
whole
year.
yeah, I think we can say
Yeah,
that
yeah,
the whole 2020 was pretty much
yeah,
shit,
yeah.
and I was even thinking about pivoting in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the industry. So I had these
Mm-hmm.
thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I didn't do it, and I'm now quite happy that I didn't. But there were some thoughts about that, and yeah, 2020 was. Retrospectively a waste of time. So
Yeah, yeah,
there was no movement at all. And yeah, I worked through that. And now 2021 was a pretty good year. We have a tremendous pipeline, and I'm happy to work now one deal after another, and it looks pretty good so far.
yeah. And you've so you went. You ended up getting. I don't know what the number was. 14, 15 LOIs that
Something
came
like
pretty
that. Yeah.
quickly. Something like that.
Yeah.
You then ended up going back to, now that you've got LOIs, you've got some structured, around commercial debt and seller finance and all of those things. And then you needed to go back to financial institutions with the actual deals, right? And
Yeah.
so, how'd that process go?
So, like I said, there was actually the relatively crushing, emotionally crushing situation that most of the banks said no, they cannot do that. Even we thought there would be no problem with the discussions we had before, so it was a little bit surprising that was not a good, or were not good weeks and months. But like I said, then we found one partner that that agrees to work with us over a long period of time. And it's funny, it's actually, and maybe that's something like subconsciousness,
Yeah, subconscious.
yeah, yeah, that maybe that's the reason why, because it was always the bank we want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, this bank. There were the interpersonal fit was perfect, and everything was pretty good. And so maybe it's not an accident that it happened, especially with this bank. But we found a good, let me say, a good deal where we can finance several deals in the future with this bank. And yeah.
And they, in terms of that whole process, they, if you go back to your LOI has changed a little over time, but you're obviously trying to do seller finance as much as possible. But you put in things like breakup fees, working capital, employment contracts, or did you include things like that if you wanted people to stay on?
Yes. So if we want the owner to stay on, we had some let me say some clauses or some points in the LOI which say mostly it works best for us to just say in the negotiation of the actual SPA or of the share purchase agreement, there will be an addendum with an actual contract, or let me say an employment contract. But oftentimes we just laid out that we want the owner to stay on for three years or whatever. We had this in the LOI. We have the breakup fees we didn't have at the beginning.
At the beginning, right? Right.
We didn't have it in the beginning, but we included it later. But the breakup fee is relatively low, so it's not a big deal. But most of the time now it works that they don't pivot or don't decline a deal too fast. So we have some leverage there. So we put this in, and we also put in working capital. So we said we want liquidity in the company for at least 3 months, so to say, working capital, that the company is able to run with the liquidity for at least 3 months. And I think that's an important thing, even if you, or especially if you start with relatively low
Right.
a low bank account in the company. So you have two options. You can negotiate a working capital with the bank, or you just try to get it from the sellers. So, and I think the second one is the better deal, and we include that. And other than that, the LOIs are pretty standard. Let me say they're a state-of-the-art M&A process LOIs. But I have to say, don't do that on the cheap, so to say.
Right.
Let the LOIs, let the lawyers of your law firm do the LOIs for you. Or if you have a really good lawyer on the board and he's willing to do that, let him do it. But I think it's better to use your outside law firm.
Yeah, I would. Most of the time, I tell people don't use the one on the board because your company is not his client or her client, right? The outside law firm, your company is. You brought them on for advice. So, do you use them in the process? Absolutely. If you let them comment on LOIs, let them say, well, we should include this and make them integral in that. But I totally agree with your outside law firm doing it. And there are people, as you say, that try to do it on the cheap. And that LOI is the basis for everything that comes after it, right? And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of people end up trying to say, well, I don't want to put a breakup fee in, or I don't want to mention this, or I don't want to mention that. I'll mention it when we get to the agreement, the purchase and sale. And then the guy, well, what's this about, right?
No, don't
deal with it up front. Make sure everybody understands the deal. Right.
Maybe I can give some advice from my experience. Try to get the LOI as detailed as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, because everything you dealt with in the LOI normally is not a discussion point after that. And if you don't deal with it in your LOI and you have to deal with it in the share purchase agreement, one thing, it is a lot more expensive then because your lawyers have to draft the documents back and forth. I experienced that myself. And the bill that will that eventually will come from the lawyers, it's not as low as you maybe think or wish. So try to not bring don't make something that will increase the workload of your lawyers without reason.
Right.
And deal with that in the LOI. It's not a binding document. You can make some mistakes there. You don't have to draft it 100 times. And I think it's good to make.
And to your point, you are going back and forth with the seller, right? So you're negotiating all these. If you kick the can down the road, now it's lawyer to lawyer. So that clock's running the whole time. And you're going to upset a bunch of people that said, well, let's say, for instance, you wanted a breakup fee, but you said, well, we'll worry about that later. Do it later, and then, whoa, what's this about? Now you got bad feelings between the two, right?
And I think if you're completely honest, the guys who say they will do it later, they won't do it.
They won't do it later.
They're just procrastinating because it's uncomfortable to do something like that.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't know what you put in there, but usually there's only a couple ways that, first of all, the breakup fee is only one way, right? And two, it's only a couple things that trip that. One, if they decide, I don't want to sell it to you, and after you've engaged your professionals. Or two, hey, I got a better deal. I'm going to sell it to somebody else. Well, you can do that, but you're going to pay a price for that, right?
So we have exclusivity in the letter of intent. That's for sure. And like you said, the breakup fee gets triggered if they go against the exclusivity, for sure. And we had it framed like that we say, to this and this date, if we deliver to you a binding offer, so to say, and you decline this offer, then you have to pay.
And your exclusivity period, 6 months or something like that?
as long as you can get.
Yeah, as long as you can get it, absolutely.
I'm happy with 6 months. That's a good period of time because maybe something to add. You said that the SPA often get negotiated between lawyers. I had the experience that even the LOI often gets negotiated, or the counterparty often has a lawyer or something similar who represent him already in the LOI. So don't be surprised if that comes out. And
and a lot of times you want to make sure that that the issues they understand, because lawyers can break up deals too, right?
Absolutely.
Clearly.
So the external, let me say, the representatives from the counterparties killed some deals already in our experience. Absolutely.
Which is a reason to have a pipeline, right?
Absolutely. So that's really important. Maybe something for the incorporation. We said don't do the LOIs on the cheap. Don't do the incorporation on the cheap. So I think that most of the people forget that. We had let me say, the credo to build our company from the beginning like we would go public.
Yep.
And I think that was really important. And I think we did everything in this credo, so to say. The accounting work, the legal work, everything that it's clean from the beginning. And if we want to sell tomorrow, everything is clean as a
smart. Prepare for where you want to get to. The other thing that I know you and I talked about, I mentioned that another mentee had done that, is that he structured the votes to be proportional to equity the way he did it. And I think you had a similar situation the way you did it, which one of the banks had an issue with that, right?
In hindsight, it was not an issue, but it was at least a question. Exactly. So let me frame it like that. We have the board, and in the board meetings, I only have the same voting power than all of the other board members. So that's one thing. But I'm not sure how it's called in English, but let me say the annual shareholder meeting or something like that. You have to do at least one time per year. I have as many votes as I have shares. So I have more power than with every other, let me say, public company. The shareholder who holds the most shares can dictate normally if they have the majority of the shares. Let me say it like that. And that's the same. I have the majority of the shares, and so relatively a good part of the decisions in the annual shareholding meeting I can decide on. But it's really critical to understand that I have, let me say, the power to vote most of the board members, for example, or to decide on which board members we have on the board. But the actual decision making of the daily and strategic way of your company is done by the board, and there I have only one vote.
Okay.
So you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So, And there were some questions why it's like that, but I think most the let me say issue was that they didn't know that I have the majority of the shares. I think that was the biggest questions we faced in some discussions.
Yeah, and you were able to say, they look at the board that's been assembled. They have no issue with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they recognized, which sometimes people don't do this. Your board recognized that you were working this hard, right? And you were doing the vast majority of the work in this as well. So it's only fair.
And I think it's only fair. And if my share will decrease for any reason, you never know, then my voting power decreases too. So so that's the way of life. If I get more partners, for example, my voting power will decrease over time. And I think that will happen over time. And I try to keep the majority for myself, but you never know.
You never know. Yeah. So, and we'll get to, now that you've done 2 deals, what that process was like. But looking back on that whole process, whether it be the mentoring, whether it be the course, whether it be the discussions later, are there parts of that that you said, okay, that was absolutely critical, or are there also things that you said, I should have spent more time on these, or it would have been helpful? Just kind of what that process was like, what was good about it, and anything that could be improved in that process.
So you're talking
just interaction with me,
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
or the course
think,
that you started with, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I started. No, actually, I bought the course. That was the first thing I did. I think the first course I bought it especially for the 1 hour.
Oh, that's right. Don't do that anymore, but I did back then.
Yeah, back then you had 1 hour with you to discuss, and I think that was the trigger. Let me say to buy the course. I think it was distilled well, the information there. But I think you also have the information, if you look close enough, you had the information relatively good laid out in your material. Yeah, I can say that. So then I decided after the call, and I think that was the most important part, after the call, maybe I have to say I looked into the newer courses, and they're really good. So there's something like, yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. But this course was relatively was quite distilled. There were I think 15 minutes videos, something like that.
Something like shorter, right?
Or shorter, and they gave you a really good glance into the different aspects. So for the start, it was perfect. Yeah. So you got to know the steps, and let me say you just started to feel comfortable with the whole methodology, and after that, the call was I think the most important thing for me. And after the call, I decided I think I should check the group coaching. So I wanted to check the whole thing before I went in to the deep end of the pool of the let's say before I started the one-on-one coaching. And so I had 1 month, I think, of group coaching.
Yeah, you made that decision pretty quickly, right? That you wanted to move from group to one-on-one.
Yeah, I think it was after the first month. And 2 reasons for that. One thing was I didn't like the mindset of all the participants of the group. I think there were some I don't think they really know what they bought into, and I don't think they want to do that really in their heart. I think they just maybe try to find something, but I don't think they're 100% in. And I felt that, and so I decided I think it's more beneficial for me to go in a one-on-one coaching, and it was more expensive for sure. Yeah, as you can imagine. Yeah, and
one of the things you said before is you didn't do stuff on the cheap. Well, that was an example as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't. I think it was a good decision. What I think where I benefited the most was in the start time. So in the start time to have some kind of a mentor once a week. I sit down with you for 1 hour. I have something. Yeah, it sounds a little bit odd, but it was something like a helping hand in tough situations where you can just talk with somebody who understands what you're doing. And at the beginning, you don't want to ask these questions to your board members sometimes. And I think the most, especially in the board building, the professionals, and also the finding acquisition targets in these steps, I think I'm not sure how if I were able to do it this quickly without you? I don't think so. So
Yeah.
I think I benefited in this first steps I did. I think I benefited a lot, and
Well,
I cannot say.
no,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I cannot say one particular thing that stand out, but it was this: you are engaged every week with somebody. You have to be accountable.
Yep.
And at the beginning, maybe you are not that accountable, but you have to be accountable. You have to say what you've done. You have to you feel the obligation to show something every week, what you've done.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's something I tricked myself more to have somebody. I have to be accountable. I have to show something, and not only to myself, but to an actual mentor. And that helps a lot.
Absolutely. And I was going to say that is that, and not everybody feels that. No, not everyone feels whether it's accountable to themselves or if they're accountable to someone else. The other thing that's critically important that I think you take for granted now just because you always did it, but you took action, consistently took action. And a lot of people look at that and end up saying, yeah, okay, but they don't end up taking action. And then it doesn't matter what the course is or what the coaching is, the key to it, the process really is pretty simple, right? You'll learn some techniques and those are helpful. But ultimately, you got to get in the ring and get beat up a little bit and learn from that, and you'll get better as you go on, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think at the starting period, it was especially helpful to have something as a sparring partner, so to say, to play this, let me say, games, how to have the conversations and
role playing,
etc. I think that was really important. And then, like you already mentioned, we have an agreement now with let me say with not with one-on-one mentoring in that sense, but we together have an arrangement, and we talk. Sometimes we talk to each other, and every time we talk, I get a lot out of it. And if I have bigger problems, I can always learn something new. But now I don't think I would need every week.
I think you're right. Is that I got a vested interest in making sure that I do everything I can to help you succeed, obviously. But you get better and better, right? Like anything else. So you've got 2 deals now. Why don't you walk us through the 2 deals that you did and any observations from those that you've got?
Absolutely. So the first one was 100% seller finance deal.
Mm-hmm.
It was a relatively complicated deal because there were several legal entities involved in that. So it was, for a legal side, it was quite a tough work. But maybe to start a little bit before that, there were quite tough negotiations between us and the seller. And something I missed a little bit in this particular case was, let me say, integrity or handshake quality, if I can say it like that. So oftentimes we agreed on something and they try to renegotiate it again. And we played hardball and say, no, we agreed on that. If we should be business partners, we have to trust each other, and that worked relatively well. But you have to be confident enough to not try to give in everything every time they ask, and they will ask a lot of times. And I have the feeling that it's the normality, it's more usual than I thought that they will renegotiate the price over and over and over and over, and they try how they can play you out. And if you do it one time, they will try it more often. So that was the first thing. Then everything went quite well. The legal documents took quite a while to get to a final contract everybody agreed on. So the lawyers had quite a lot of work to do there, and then there was the signing, and later there was the closing. So there's nothing spectacular on this side. That everything went quite well. What I want to mention, I had a completely different view how the first closing will be. Mm-hmm. Completely. I thought I will be enthusiastic and euphoric and maybe had the mood of partying. Nothing like that. So it was more like a feeling of arrival. Mm-hmm. So it was not, it's not like you get a present or something like that. It was more than, okay, now we did it. Okay, let's go on. And actually on this day we had the first closing. We had another appointment for another closing, so or for another potential deal. So we didn't slow down 1 second after the closing. And like I said, it was more of a feeling of arrival. But maybe I go into the interesting part, and don't underestimate the running of the business.
Oh yeah, I always say that's the hardest part, right? You know,
everything else is easy peasy.
Yeah.
Really. So,
and for those people that said, "Oh well, okay, so it must be easy. He's spending all his time." That's not true. You have a day job, right? For a while.
Yeah, I have.
For a while.
I have. Yeah.
So,
sure.
So yes. So, then you have all the problems of running the business. One of the things you did well, which other people try to not do, is the first deal's got to be a strong deal, cash flows, has a profit margin, stuff happens, and if it's a turnaround deal for your first deal, you're in big trouble usually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have good margins, relatively good margins, not the best margins in the industry, but they were solid. We have good revenue stream, we have good employees, and that's something maybe I underestimated in the first due diligence, to look how good your employees really are. That's a big one. You have to check that. Maybe as an advice from my side is, don't focus only on the legal and financial due diligence, but look deep into the operations and the operation due diligence. I think that's really important, and maybe something I had or should do better in the future, to have a better plan for what happens after the closing.
Yeah.
Better prepared how you will run it from the beginning. And I see it now. The start after the second closing was much smoother, much better, because we had a better plan how we integrate all the things. So that's something maybe for somebody listening should keep in mind. And
I'm a big proponent of doing a management plan, adjusting that on a quarterly basis, up or down, depending upon what the economics are, and then keeping a close look on what those key metrics are on a weekly, some businesses on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So that you know what's happening. Time doesn't go by and say, "Ooh, that was a bad quarter."
Yeah.
No, you know what's going to happen along the way. And then this week you closed your second deal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that was easier. Now it was more familiar. So we did that, and everything went perfectly well. And like I said, integration at the second deal is quite easier, because you already know some hurdles, some potential pitfalls, and you know what to look at and where you should start the integration in the whole group. And one thing maybe I want to mention, in the first deal, we had some layoffs there. And that's something that it's really not. It's not a good day if you have to do that. It's not funny. It really is not funny. But sometimes it's necessary, and there is never a good time for hard decisions. So you have to go through that. And I think that helps the whole company, and that's maybe something to look at. It shows the rest of the employees there is a new spirit.
Yeah.
There is a new spirit of performance, and we increased some salaries already, and they say, hey, if I perform, I will get a good salary, but if I don't perform, if I don't have my place in the company, they will throw me out, because they look to their family, so to say, and the family is the ones who perform.
Yeah.
And I think it's important.
It is important. And most of the time employees realize, if you keep so-and-so around who's not doing anything, they perceive not doing anything, and a lot of times not doing much, then someone has to pick up that work, right? So it's unfair to the other performers. Absolutely. The other thing you commented to me about was that after your first acquisition, the professionals behaved a whole lot differently.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
That was so. After we paid the first bill, so to say, it was a different story. So now they know there's something behind this whole thing.
There's something here. They're believers. Yeah.
And now it's like you said, it's a different story there. They're even more responsive in their way of communication. They were extremely responsive, but it's even more now. And you feel that they have now also internally more resources they can use.
Yeah, absolutely. They, somebody. Go ahead.
If the bill comes, pay it fast. So they waited a long time. Don't try to, in my opinion, that's my opinion, don't try to negotiate too much.
Yeah.
Just take it, pay it, and everything's good.
Yeah.
Let your lawyer internally check it, but
and to your point, just like with the seller, you made a deal with them, right? And you expect them to honor the deal. They made a deal with you, and they expect you to honor the deal. Absolutely. There was someone who asked me to ask you, and then when I did with Deborah the Q&A, a question that I found interesting, and it goes to mindset. But what were the 3 times that you thought you wanted to quit? And there weren't any, right?
No, really not.
Same thing Deborah said. No, never did.
No, never ever. So didn't come to my mind yet.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the process works. You had confidence that you could work that process, and so did you run into periods of time where it took a whole lot longer than you thought it was going to, and the COVID situation and those things? Yeah, but ultimately you knew where you wanted to get to, and at least twice now you've done that, and you got a pipeline, and you've got a financing arm that can carry you, into the future deals. So you might not have a full-time job, day job, much longer.
I don't think so. So we'll without any further transactions, we will get to about, I think, about to $10 million, something like that. For this year. So in revenue. So
which is good. And people ask me, well, why do you do this? And I ask myself that question every once in a while. But to see people like you that have actually gone through the process and are on their way to not only completing some deals, but can see what this lifestyle is going to be for you. That's the reason I do this. That's the reason I do this. It's cool. It's cool to see that. And is it hard? Sure, it's hard. But most things that are worthwhile doing are hard. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's funny, and some of it is your upbringing. I think if I remember right, your father was a tough taskmaster, and you had a meeting scheduled with him, and you were like 2 minutes late or something like that, and you text him and said, "Where are you?"
He said, "You were late. I left." So
Exactly.
that's that accountability, has carried through and has served you well. So that's good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any last thoughts on anything you want to pass on that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so. I think we talked about a lot, and I think there were some good things we discussed. And no, I don't think so. I think the most, maybe one thing, and maybe that's not something everybody wants to hear, but it's not. It really, you have to be some type of personality to do that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you agree, Mr. Whipple, but I think there are many types of persons and individuals who won't be happy with this life.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say it like that, because it's you have to pay some prices there. You have to pay the price with your wife. You have to pay the price with friends, potentially, with holiday, with vacation, with other things. So I don't know if everybody wants to do that, but
which is fine if that's an individual choice, right?
No
and I totally agree with that. Is that one of the advantages that a sales background gives you most of the time is that you've been through the sales roller coaster ride. You've had deals that you think were going to happen that crashed and burned, and you're like, oh my God. And then deals that went through, and you're celebrating that. And over time, the highs aren't as highs and the lows aren't as low. In the beginning, just like anything else, it can be pretty crushing and pretty mind dizzying when it goes together. But that's a helpful background. But yeah, you have to realize there is a pay price to action. If a deal has to get done and you should be there for your son's first birthday, guess what? You're probably going to have to miss that first birthday or postpone it. And for some people, they say that's not what I'm willing to do, and that's okay. That's an individual choice, but absolutely. So I'm delighted to see how things are coming together for you. You've worked hard for it. It's not anywhere near where it's going to end up. That I'm sure of. You're going to see a lot more success. But I also want to thank you for doing this. You didn't have to do this, and I'm glad you did. So we will hope that people benefit from this, and I'm sure they will. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Whipple, and have a nice evening.
You do the same.